Hi, I'm Jay. I'm here with the Twister T4. I'm going to show you how to do a pre-run inspection before you use this machine. Number one, the machine has to be really clean, which this machine's clean. Number two, this is a stainless version where there's a stainless and a standard. The stainless is typically used in really high regulatory environments or EU GMP. This machine is very, very durable. So again, I'm going to tear it apart and we're going to build it back up, and I'll show you all the tips and tricks. First thing we have here is a plastic cover. This knob can be plastic or stainless, depends on the machine it's on. We'll get this belt off. Get this control box off. Control box can't get wet. It can get wiped down. Damage guard. Tumbler only comes out one way. This way. We'll take the shroud off. Take these quick release levers out. Flip up this bed knife. Now, one thing I can do is take the brush off. So you take the brush off this one end, undo this cap. Brush will slide out. Now you can soak this in full strength simple green or whatever, hot water, and brush it. It'll come really clean. So we're gonna put that back in. We're gonna check the bushings in here to make sure they're good. They're not too, there's a brass bushing. Make sure that's in good shape. Slide that back in. Some machines have a quick release handle for this brush, so you can take the brush in and out fast. Some people don't take the brush off because they like to leave it on to keep it clean, or clean it while it's on the machine. So here we go. We're going to look at, the first thing we're going to look at is the blades. So we're going to spin the blades. Just spin them nice and free. So they spin nice, they spin smooth. There's no growling or rumbling. The bearings sound good. If there was something wrong, the bearings would sound like I don't know, a broken shopping cart wheel, or they might rumble, or there'd be friction, it'd be hard to spin them. So these blades are in good shape. So we have the bed knife making contact on both parts of the blade, that's good. We're just looking over this bed knife to make sure there's no cracks, no nicks. You can look down this edge, make sure it's nice and square. I'm gonna check this blade over really closely, make sure there's no cracks or nicks in it. This edge here, over time, it should stay quite square. It's not very sharp, it's just square, the same as this. It's very square. So both look good. If you find any sort of corrosion along this edge, you should be able to wipe it clean. So now we have this bed knife making contact with the blades. On the back side, we have these clickers. You're going to check the clickers, make sure they click. You can hear that sound. This side clicks as well. That's good. Make sure these screws that hold the clickers in are there. They look snug. That's good. Now if these don't click, there's some stainless balls in there, there's some detents that are missing. Those have to be replaced. So that clicks. Make sure the clevis pin is in. This pin is in. There's a C-clip on there. Those are both intact on both sides. Very important. And we're going to make sure this spins all the way in and all the way out. What can happen is keef and material can build up on these threads, and those threads will jam. So this spins nice and freely. Now if those threads are dirty, you can spray them with WD-40, run them in and out, and clean it off. We're gonna now put this bar, this clicker bar, back up into its position. You can see that we want to look in this hole here to make sure this hole is lined up. There, it's nice and lined up. I'm gonna do this on both sides. This bed knife, we're making sure it's pressed down. These holes line up, and now I can put the quick release levers in. It's very important that the holes line up before you put the levers in, otherwise you can strip the threads. So now that they're both almost tight, they're snug, now you can snug them both up at the same time. Spin these in. If they stick out, they can get broken off, or people get hung up on them or hooked on them, so spin them in. Now we're gonna look at the blade. You can hear it, it's making contact. Some paper here. So from the end, we can do a paper test. Make sure it cuts paper. You see it cuts paper nicely. Now, if your machine isn't cutting paper, it can be a few things. The blades may be dull. Either they weren't kept adjusted properly, or they just need replacement. Or there's some offset bushings on here that need to be adjusted. Now, that's something that you shouldn't do yourself. You should call us for explanation on how to do that. It's kind of a technical procedure, and it's something we have to walk you through. Now, the blades are sharp, or the blades are making contact. The clickers work. The quick adjustments are in. We're gonna put the bottom shroud in. So this shroud is, what happens often is people will drop these. They'll get bent on the ends. They will get opened up too far. So this is something you have to do a quick check over on. We're gonna slide it in. There's some pins that hold it in. We're gonna flip it up. And there's two primary areas you wanna check. The first is under here. There's typically a gasket, a rubber gasket on the shroud. What can happen is if you're using an ultra clean, or if you're power washing this machine a lot, the gasket can come off. If you're not replacing the gasket, you'll have a gap in here. Now, you don't have to have the gasket, but if you don't have the gasket, you have to close that gap up. And you do that by bending the shroud up a little bit. It's very easy. You can usually often do it by hand, but the key is making sure this hole is tight. Second side is, we'll look at this after, there's another hole on the other side that we want to be tight as well. Before we do that, we're going to put the tumbler in. Now, the common thing people do when they put the tumbler in, first we're going to look at the tumbler and make sure it's round. Looks pretty good, there's no damage to it. Seems like it's in good shape. These can get damaged by hitting them on the edge of a table, by dropping them, and another way they get damaged is putting them in and pulling up. So before we put this in, we're going to check this pulley. This pulley is pretty critical. It's what drives the blade. There's an inner ring on here which can get damaged, and it gets damaged by putting the tumbler in and hitting it with a tumbler. If I bang it with a tumbler, I'll do it right now. You see I bent it. So I'm going to bend it back, but if you hit it hard enough, you'll break it off. You hit it enough, it becomes very weak. If this brake comes off, then you'll damage your belts. So it's important that you don't hit it with the tumbler when you drive this in. Push the tumbler in straight. Tumbler's in. Now, this is the other area you want to check for gap. There's a gap between this shroud and the tumbler. You want that gap to be as tight as possible. So if this shroud was bent, that gap would be small. If when I squeeze it, I can tighten it up a bit. Now I can tighten this up by taking the shroud off and squeezing the shroud a bit, and that'll tighten that gap up. That gap right there is not too big, but any bigger, air is gonna bypass and the machine is gonna work optimally. Next, we're going to put the control box on. I'll do it this way so you can see. You want to inspect all of the decals on the machine, decals, depending on where you're from, and you want to replace them if they need to be replaced. They're warning decals, they're to let the operator know there's a danger. So if you find that they're coming off, please replace them. Control box slides on. I'm going to squeeze it up, put the belt on. Pull this pin first. So belt's on. Now, pull this plunger. Make sure the drive wheel is engaged in the tumbler. This drive wheel is a replaceable part. It will wear. If you find that yours is worn down, you should replace it. Now, it'll take some wear. You can wear it quite a bit further than this. There are some treads in it that tell you to give you a wear indicator. If you can't see the treads, that means it's been worn pretty good. You can go a fair amount past that, but just keep in mind, once this gets worn down too much, you're gonna start having performance issues. So now that we have, I'm gonna lock this lever. I'm gonna check the belt tension. There's tension there, that's good. Feels good. Tension came off. Tension's good. Make sure it's tight. Put the belt cover on. Last, we're going to put on the stainless cover, stainless guard. You want to make sure these pins are in, the hinges work, the guard seats down. You should go in fairly easily. You may put one finger on here, one finger on here. So now we're going to plug this in and listen to the sound it makes for the blades. Should start this way. You want to check the plug, make sure the ground's on it. So we're going to start by turning the blades on to see how they sound. So that was far too loud, they were too tight. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly adjust each side. Each side one at a time until I can get that click. You can see I'm now one click away, 4 clicks away on each side from the blades making contact. Right there is where I want to run the machine. You can go a little bit more contact than that. You can also go less. Some facilities want no contact. Other facilities want a little bit tighter. I recommend you just hear a slight ticking sound. So that wraps up the walkthrough of the T4. Hopefully you learned all the ins and outs. Actually, one thing I forgot to mention is these rollers. When you take the tumbler out, you want to spin all of these rollers to make sure that they spin freely. When you spin them again, they should spin very smooth. They should have the caps on the ends. What can happen is they will eventually wear and you'll have to replace them. Typically the one that needs to be replaced first is this one in this corner or this one in this corner. When those have to be replaced, you should replace all of them the same in the tires in your car. You don't replace one and then wait until the other one fails. Replace them all at once because then you'll start chasing problems. So you replace the 4 on this side and the 4 on this side. Depending on how much you use the machine will depend on how fast you, or how often you have to change them. Also how you clean the machine. If you're cleaning the machine in an ultrasonic cleaner, you'll have to change them more frequently. If you're cleaning the machine with just hot water, less frequently, a hot power washer, again, not as often. So if you run the machine for on average, 4 months straight with heavy cleaning, you should change these rollers every 4 months. So that was a general walkthrough of the T4. If you have any questions, reach out to our tech support. We can walk you through anything you need to see. Thanks again.